Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Hey, good evening. Welcome to California Haunts Radio. My name is Charlotte. I'll be your host for the next hour. I think I've got a great show for you. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team based out of sunny Sacramento, California. We are 35 strong up and down the state of California. We also have members in Oregon, Washington, Nevada, and Hawaii. And like I always say, someday I'll get to Hawaii and go ghost hunting. We'll see. You know, problem is if I go, I won't come back. So you guys will be listening to somebody else on the California Haunts Radio Show. But anyway, welcome to the show. I want to thank everybody for joining us. We had a great show last night, and tonight we're going to have an even better show because it's something that's near and dear to my heart. Cryptids. We're going to be talking to the master cryptid keeper. Okay, Lon Strickler is going to be with us tonight. Before we get going, though, I want to introduce you to the CaliforniaHauntsRadio.com website where all of our videos, and this goes out live there as well. And you guys can catch up on all the shows we've done, and we've done almost 250 shows since we started in this format. So you can check those out at CaliforniaHauntsRadio.com. Also at CaliforniaHauntsRadio.com, we are putting our blog talk shows up, and that goes back 15 years. So honestly, I've just started. I've got the first couple years up there, but you'll be able to go through all those archives as well. Okay? If you're watching from YouTube tonight, be sure to subscribe. If you look down at the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see a little ghost with a magnifying glass and a Sherlock Holmes hat on, and that is our mascot ghost. And I forgot to hit my other button. See how I have my buttons? Look at that. There we go. I got the other button. But that's our mascot. So if you click on that, that will give you announcements as when we have new videos up, which we try to do these things Monday through Thursday. And then we also do a reading Sunday where we read, well, my producers and I, where I read a ghost-based book, something that's true and has to do with ghosts. And it could be a story like we're reading right now, The Way Through the Woods, or it could be something like The Ghost of Flight 401, but it's always a book, that has to do with a haunting, something like that. So be sure to check that out. And like I said, if you subscribe, those announcements will come up and let you know that these videos are up. Anyway, I want to thank you guys for coming tonight. And our ghost hunt, which I call a ghost tour, scheduled for March 26th, will be at a cemetery, a very active cemetery. And there's two spots open. We had one spot open, but the person couldn't make it on the other spot. So we've got two spots open. So if you're interested in going to that, you can either visit our California Haunts meetup site, which is under California Haunts, or go over to CaliforniaHauntsRadio.com, go across the top, get over to where it says extras, and it'll plop right down a special event. Okay? So check us out because we're eager to take you ghost hunting. You can even meet me and hang out with me. Use some of our equipment. We've got some really cool stuff. We just got in a load of equipment as well, which I'm still playing with, which is kind of neat. I like to play with stuff. But anyway, I'm not a technical person. I don't read instructions. I'm one of these people that I just turn stuff on and I just go for it. So that's what I'm doing right now. My poor house is always the victim. So any EMF things that I have or anything like that, that's what I'm doing. I'm running around my house to test all the EMF and see what it does. Okay. Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to bring Lon on, and he can tell you a little bit about himself, and then we're going to start talking some really cool stuff tonight, okay? Here we go. How's it doing, old friend?
How you doing, Charlotte?
Good. It's good to see you.
Well, it's good to be here. How you doing?
I'm doing good. We're doing really good.
Good.
For the people that don't know who you are, please tell us who you are.
Well, I've been involved with the paranormal, I would say, all my life, basically. I have had several encounters during that period of time, but I really got started into investigating the paranormal back when it wasn't fashionable, back in the mid-70s. And I had some encounters as a kid, and then, of course, when I became older and became an adult, I did have an encounter with a Bigfoot back in 1981 in Maryland. And then I had a winged humanoid encounter in 1988 here in Pennsylvania, not far from where I live now. And as time went on, I continued to do private investigations and just keeping notes and such as to what I was doing. I wasn't publishing anything. When I guess around the turn of the millennium, I I started writing for another website, and somebody suggested, well, why don't you get your own blog? And I wasn't into blogging. I didn't know anything about that. So in 2005, I started phantomsandmonsters.com, and I've been doing it daily since. And since that time, I've written 9 books, and I have an investigative team. We look into all aspects of the paranormal, mostly cryptids, and that's led to where we are now.
Awesome. Let me ask you about your first encounter with Bigfoot. What was that like?
Well, it was a one and only encounter. That was in 1981. I was actually in Sykesville, Maryland. I was living there at the time. I used to be a pretty avid fly fisherman, so I was down on the south branch of the Patapsco River, just downstream from Sykesville. And as I was fishing, I noticed that there was a dog across the river, and the river isn't really wide there. It's probably about 20 foot wide, but it's an area I knew. I used to go there a lot, and as I was fishing, I noticed this dog was over there, but I didn't really pay it much attention until this thing yelped. And when it yelped, I looked across the river and I saw something stand up into the weeds. They were in the weeds, pretty high weeds too. It's like early spring. But this thing stood up, and I got a look at it at about mid chest up because of the weeds. And I didn't really know what I was looking at. It started walking towards my left. And when it came out of the weeds, it turned and faced me. And I was probably about, I don't know, maybe 50 feet away from it. And we kind of locked eyes for like 10 seconds or so. But, I thought I was looking at a Bigfoot, but I wasn't really sure. This thing looked more human than it did, though it had hair all over it. It had the deep, the real thick brow ridge and the conical head. But it just, I've always described it as looking like a Neanderthal more than anything else, though this thing was huge. It had some had some size to it. It was about, I'd say, close to 8 foot in height. It was a large being, and definitely a male. I could see the genitalia on this thing. It just stood there looking at me, and it was making a ticking sound, which I later figured it was some type of nervous tick or something. It was gnashing its teeth. I have heard of other sightings where that has happened, or encounters where that has happened. So I'm looking at this thing, wondering what the hell I'm looking at. This thing turns around and starts walking into the woods. And, I'm in hip waders, so, I can't do much about it. So, but I did make my way out of the river, went up to my car and drove back into town. And, when I got to the first phone I could find, I called the local police and told them what I saw. They didn't really seem too overly concerned. And the reason why is we had a mental institution that's called Springfield. That's very nearby. So I guess they just figured, well, it's somebody else who escaped from, the nut house. But anyway, she said, well, look, go back there and we'll have somebody meet you, which I wasn't thrilled about, because I didn't want to go back there and run into this thing again. But I said, okay. So I got back in the car, and it was only like a three-minute drive back. And by the time I got there, there was a Maryland State Trooper already there, and they had a barricade across the road. So when I pulled up, he came up to my window and said, you got to get out of here. I said, look, I had just made a call. I saw something, and I called the local police. Said, I don't care. You got to leave. Okay. So I turned around and left, went home. So about an hour later, I I figured, well, look, I'm going to go back on down there and see what's going on. So I did. I drove back, and boy, when I got like a quarter mile from the location, there was just cars all up and down the road. I had to park and walk up. And when I got to the location, the barrier was still there. They had a Howard County police officer standing there then. And there were people walking all around with dogs, and there was a big white tent set up across the river on the north side where I'd seen this thing. And I heard helicopters. There were all kinds of official vehicles there, even federal. Back that time in the early 80s, the feds used to drive those black Wagoneers.
Right.
So it wasn't like the RV thing like nowadays. So, but there were cars from every jurisdiction in the area, and they were in the woods, and I mean, lots of people. So I just kind of got up to the Howard County cop, and I asked him, so what's going on? And he said, he's kind of laughing when he said, well, somebody said they saw a Bigfoot, and of course I didn't tell him I was the person who made the call. So I said, oh, okay. I said, they find anything? He said, yeah, I think they found some hair or something. I don't know. I don't even remember what he told me. But I said, okay. So I stood there for about maybe 5-10 minutes just watching. All it was people going around the woods. I suspect, the fact that they had the tent up there was kind of bizarre, I thought. I don't know if they had gotten this thing or what, but I did find out later that there had been a report of someone downriver about 3 hours previously seeing this thing and reporting it. But anyway, when I got back home, I called the local television stations, which were three. There were three of them that I called in Baltimore. Told them what happened, and they said, oh, yeah, give us a call back a couple of days, or we'll call you, and we'll get the full story on this after we look into it. Well, 4 days later, I don't hear anything, so I called one of the stations, tell them, I talked to the news editor, and they literally hung up on me. He told me, I don't want to talk to you. Huh. So, my interest was really peaked in, and then as time went on, I found out back in the early 70s, there had been a number of sightings in the Sykesville area, especially along the river, of this creature they called the Sykesville monster. So I looked into that. I was able to talk to some of the previous witnesses and even others who had not made the reports. So I was getting a pretty good idea of what people were seeing. This thing was literally breaking into garages and chicken pens and homes and such. So it did make national news. But I had never heard of it because I was living in Pennsylvania and I moved down there, and I had never heard of this thing. As the time has gone on, and I continue to take reports of things that happen around, and there have been several sightings around there. In fact, BFRO has documented 4 Class A sightings beside mine in the area. So people are seeing something, and I have talked to other witnesses as well. But I did get some confirmation from at least one police officer and somebody else who had been there at the time of my sighting, verified everything what I saw. So so that was my Bigfoot sighting, and it was kind of interesting, the whole government involvement thing right off the bat, and that's what really got me interested in cryptids. So as time went on, I started looking into Bigfoot and other things as time went on.
Well, when I was listening to you talk about the police get involved and all that, it reminded me of a car I had. I had this car that was having nothing but trouble. Mm-hmm. And I found stuff on the internet, went to the dealer. Dealer says, oh, no, we haven't heard anything about this. Yet there were all these problems on the internet. Next thing I know, within about a month, the car gets recalled. Sometimes that's how they are. You'll go in and talk to the police like that about something like, say, Bigfoot, and they're not going to say that they've heard anything about it. Next thing you know, they all descend on one spot, like you're saying.
Well, this whole Sykesville monster thing was all word of mouth because as time went on, and eventually back in 2014, Monsters and Mysteries of America did a segment about my sighting.
Mm-hmm.
And the woman who was the city manager at the time got all this together, and she had access to the police files. And she said, "There's nothing in there. There's not a thing about your sighting or anybody else's sighting in this thing." And she checked with some of the, the federal and some of the other jurisdictions in the area, and nobody had any idea what would happen. So yeah, that kind of made it intriguing. So, but that's how I started out looking into cryptids.
Interesting. And you say you saw a wing cryptid too, right?
Yeah, back in 1988, I had an encounter with, the long story of it is I was living in Maryland. I was living in Baltimore, actually. And there was a Boy Scout exposition up in Timonium, which is a northern suburb of the city of Baltimore. And when I was there, I ran into a friend of mine, somebody I had known in high school and had been Boy Scouts together. I hadn't seen this guy in about 12 years. So, but it's interesting. He knew I was in the paranormal because he used to spend time on the Gettysburg battlefield with me as a kid. So we had seen a few things together. But anyway, we sat down, we're eating some lunch and stuff. And as we talked, he mentioned to me, he said, next weekend, me and a friend and I are going up to the old Camp Conewago and look into something that's going on up there. And now, this was at the time, it was in the fall. He said, but all summer long, the campers and the troops that have been camping in the woods outside, at the campground, were running out of there, packing up and leaving early because they were complaining that they were hearing these god awful screams, and they didn't know what it was, and they were scared. A bunch of being kids, they were all scared of what was going on. So we're going up there and next weekend, and you want to come along? I said, yeah, So I did. I met them up there that following Friday. And we got together, hiked into the woods, set up our campsite. We had 3 tents, set up the camp, had started cooking, built a fire, started cooking. And that night was really quiet. We just sat around, talking all kinds of different things, but catching up. But it was, nothing going on. So, we went and slept, got up the next morning, and the other guy had mentioned, he said, did you hear something walking around the campsite? And I heard something walking around, but I thought it was one of those guys getting up to go in the woods, relieve themselves or whatever. I just figured it was one of them, but apparently it wasn't. But the campsite hadn't been disturbed at all, so I didn't really pay much mind, didn't think much about it. I thought maybe it's a deer or something moving around. Well, anyway, so that we spent that day hiking in through the woods and looking around, see if we could pick anything up, figure out what the hell was going on, all these screams and stuff. And we were going all day. I mean, we got back to the campsite, it was about 6 in the evening, just starting to turn dark. And, we sat down, had some lunch, had some dinner, and just sitting there talking. We really weren't thinking about what had been going on or what had been reported. But I'd say about 10 o'clock, we heard this screaming sound. Now, it didn't appear to be anything unusual to me. I thought maybe some animal or something. It wasn't that horrendous, So we didn't pay much mind. So about an hour later, we heard it again. But this time it sounded like either a kid or a female screaming, and it was loud, and it was pretty blood curdling, to be honest with you. And it seemed like it was going in and out, like this thing was moving away and coming back and forth. So that got our attention. So we decided to stay up the evening, and maybe something else will happen. So we sat there for a while. So it was getting, I think it was about 1 a.m. And I got up to stretch my legs. I walked around the campsite a bit, and I walked out on the trail. The trail was right by the campsite, and on the other side of the trail was the Conewago Creek. So very bright night. It was enough moonlight that we could see into the woods and see into the creek pretty well. So, but I was standing there and I got this strange feeling like, something just doesn't seem right. I'm an intuitive, so I kind of sense things before things do happen, but I just got that weird feeling like something was watching. So I went back to the campfire and I told this guy, I said, look, let's go up onto the trail, walk up and down a bit and see if we can, find anything. So we grabbed our flashlights, went single file up the trail, and we didn't get very far, maybe 50 foot from the campsite, and when we saw these red eyes in the creek. Now this time of year the creek's pretty low, so we saw these real bright red eyes, and it looked like eyes. And by the time we got the flashlights on this thing, it literally jettisoned itself into the air. We could hear a whooshing sound when it left. And I suppose when it got to its apex, it started letting out these horrible screams. And then it was flying away and it faded out. So we rolled back into the campsite quickly. My buddy, he was frightened. I mean, he was freaked out. The other guy and I were talking, and he said, "Did you notice anything on the back?" And I had noticed something like some high structures on the back, which we assumed were wings, but we never saw the wings open up. But this thing literally jettisoned itself without using these wings. So my buddy, finally talked and said, "Well, I'm not spending the night here. I'm going up the administration building." So those two went up there and spent the night. I stayed around the campsite. I wanted to see what it was. I mean, I was hoping to come back, but I didn't see anything the rest of the night. And as time has gone by, almost 20 years later, I actually wrote about it. I had told a few people about it, but in 2008, I wrote about it, put it in the blog, and then I started getting comments. One guy who had lived in the area mentioned that he had been hearing those screaming sounds for 20 years, never knew what it was. Then after that, I had a scout master contact me and say, my troop and I were up there Camp Conewago not long ago, and the boys had gone out during the day, on the trail to do exploring like kids do. And they came running back all freaked out, saying that they saw a dragon. That's what they called it. And of course, he thought they were pulling his leg. And he didn't think much about it. He said, though, they were scared. So when he read the account I posted, then he knew maybe they did see something. And as time has gone by, since 2008, I've had 5 other sightings reported to me up and down the creek. Now, the creek is pretty long. It actually goes a little further west and heads east again and empties into the Susquehanna River. So I guess it's close to 20 miles long. But I've had other sightings along the creek.
Interesting. A few months ago, we had an alleged Mothman sighting here in Sacramento. And a lot of people aren't aware of it because it was in some obscure online newspaper that they posted it. But they said they saw it on the Tower Bridge, that somebody was driving by and saw this thing. And they even saw the wings on it. I didn't hear anything else about it. I went out there to check it out, just nothing. But I mean, there was just this thing that showed up. So you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I hadn't heard about that. So, yeah, I mean, and, we got a lot of different sightings from a lot of different places. Now, of course, myself and my team have been looking into this phenomenon in Chicago started 2011. Though it had been some historical sightings, but it really started ramping up in 2017. And we just had our 140th, what we felt is a confirmed sighting 2 weeks ago. So, but most of it's concentrated in the area around O'Hare International now. So, but there are sightings, and it's all walks of life. We've had airline pilots and TSA security. Other people that work around the airport and making these reports. But there's something definitely going on out there. And, but of course, we've been getting these sightings in and around Chicago now for at least 5 years. So these beings are out there. And we have had sightings in other areas. I mean, I've written about it. I've written 2 books about it so far.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I mean, this is a phenomenon that continues on. It's just not the Mothman of Point Pleasant.
Right, right.
These winged beings, though they are different in size and description for the most part, as opposed to what was reported at Point Pleasant. They're out there.
How do you confirm one? I mean, is there a certain set of questions you have that you ask people when you talk to them?
Well, it depends. I mean, most of the time when we first get the anecdotal evidence as far as the sighting report and talk to them, we concentrate on what they're telling us, and if they embellish on it. And which is one thing that's been pretty interesting about these sightings is these witnesses very rarely embellish. They kind of tell us what they saw, stick to the story, and don't go beyond that, which is unusual with cryptid sightings and reports. I've got 2 investigators in the Chicago area, and southern Wisconsin and in Chicago, and they have and their name Manuel Navarrete and Tobias Whalen. They've been with my Phantoms and Monsters 14 research team, and they're the kind of boots on the ground. I've got some other people in the area as well, so yeah, we pretty well follow up on what happened. We get the reports, and when I first started the team, Rosemary Ellen Golly and she was working with me back then too. So at that time, she was literally, I'd get the report, she'd follow up with them and verify it. So yeah, so we were pretty busy, and we're still, it's not we don't get it as much as we used to. The reports out at the airport have been more sporadic as of late because, and I think it has a big reason why it's been more sporadic, is that the security and the powers that be at the airport have been trying to quell this whole thing. They have been threatening employees with termination and such, and it's been pretty wild. We've actually had some witnesses report that they had taken video and photographs of these things, and that if when they were caught by the by security, they made them clear it. Wow. And erase everything, which that'd be a big blow when we got that. But but when you talk to these folks, something happened. They really, their physical and reaction to when they're talking to you, and the way they tell you, you can pretty well surmise that they definitely had something happen to them.
When you talk about the Mothman at Point Pleasant being different than the one in Chicago, do you think it's like with Sasquatch, where sometimes the colors on the Sasquatch are different, depending on their region? Do you think that might be the case with that?
Well, I think there are different types. I mean, for the most part, the Mothman at Point Pleasant was like an insectoid, moth-like being. He had the big red eyes. He didn't have much of a head. It was basically the eyes were kind of built into the upper body. The reports that we've gotten in and around Chicago have varied, but for the most part, they're like a membrane bat-like wing, gargoyle wing, with a very thin, dark body. With sometimes the arms are attached to the wings, sometimes they're detached from the wings. We get the red eyes for the most part. I'd say maybe 75% of the time, it's the red eyes are prominent. A very thin head, but there's some variations too. And I believe there have been several of these things that have shown up. Now, as to what they are, where they reside, I believe they're ultra-terrestrial beings. I think they're interdimensional. Why they are here, we don't really know that yet. We've got a lot of conjecture as to what these things are. But My personal opinion is I think most cryptids that people report come from probably the same place, the same dimension. I believe it's a very linear dimension as opposed to our Earth plane.
Hmm.
I think they have the ability to move in and out quite frequently, and I think that they do stay for a very finite period of time, and I think that's maybe probably the reason why we don't have any bodies or any real physical evidence, as you know. So yeah, so who knows? That's my thoughts. That's the
Hmm.
thoughts of myself and others as well. So there's just no way we can really be definitive about it. But all we can do is just take the evidence as it comes and make our determination and go from there. But yeah, it's been a very interesting 5 years or so. It's come in waves, but yeah, it's a very interesting and enigma. Actually, it's just we're just going to keep working on it until we hopefully we get some answers.
I always wonder, because the aliens doing their experimentation with people here on Earth, and I always wonder because obviously these aliens have, I mean, they visit the Egyptians, so obviously they had to have come way before that too. And so I always wonder about things like Sasquatch or maybe the Mothman that they came when early man was here, and they tried to make some hybrids. They were experimenting with that. And that's how you got the Mothman, and they took they took a flying one of those flying birds, and did that, and who knows? Like you
I
say,
think
who
there's a
knows?
connection
Yeah,
um, as to what it is or why it happened. We really don't know. You
right.
know,
Nobody knows.
you can speculate a lot. A lot of people write about a lot of different things, and I've had some encounters where I have been shown a few things, though I don't know if it's just you know if I'm being told the truth or being led in a direction to kind of fit their agenda or what it is. But I think they do have an agenda.
Hmm.
Um, I think the whole alien abduction thing is. I mean, I think it is an agenda based, and I think it's something that they're trying to get that we have,
Hmm.
and I think for the most part that has to do with our being, our life force, and our beliefs, where we feel that when we pass, and most people feel this, and when we pass, that we go to another level, our energy goes to another level. You want to call it a soul, you can call it life force, whatever you want to call it. But I think that's something they seek, they desire to have. And I think a lot of the abductions are based on that agenda.
Hmm. Hmm. So, what's been one of the most recent, or the most sighting that you've seen that has stood out to you? Of witnessing it.
Well, and of course, it's been what's been going on in Chicago. I mean, that's probably the biggest case I've been involved with.
Hmm.
Uh, we've been doing investigations here in Pennsylvania with upright canines, dogmen, if you want to call it that, the canine cryptids.
Okay.
We kind of concentrate on the state, though. Of course, I get sightings all around. I get a lot of sightings, a lot of different things. Uh, there's no shortage of cryptids out there. And of course, you always end up getting something that nobody knows what the hell it was. So, uh, I'm just kept pretty busy. I'm pretty busy, actually. I mean, it's I do try to keep up with everybody who contact me, but it's almost impossible to do that.
Let me ask you this: when you talk
Mhm.
about the dogmen, what's the usual description of them?
It just depends. For the most part, these are upright beings. They're described in different forms. I say here in Pennsylvania, the most the common description is a very large being. Actually, think of underworld lichens from the movies. That's
Hmm.
pretty well what people describe. Uh, 9 to 10 foot, large upper chest, thin torsos, very muscular arms and legs. Some are hawked, some are human-like. Large feet that are clawed. Same with the hands that are clawed, and a wolf-like head. And that's what people have been describing to us for the most part. People call them werewolves. People call them all kinds of things. Now, there are other quadrupeds that I just call the dog man. That it just there are just some aspects to it that look a bit human. For the most part, those sightings are of a hyena-like being with the sloping back, but it's got the head of a wolf or something like a wolf,
Hmm.
and they're huge as well. They seem to be very intuitive. And I think most cryptids do have a lot of intuitive nature to them.
Mm-hmm.
I think they have the ability to use their minds to do some type of manipulation with witnesses. If it's some people say it's infrasound, some people say it's something else like ESP, or I don't know what it is. But I think most witnesses, what I've talked to, do seem to be somewhat influenced by these things when they come across them. In fact, I've had witnesses who have been hunting and been armed, and they don't even think about pulling a gun up on them. They just literally back off. And now we haven't had any accounts where anybody's been attacked. They do stand their ground. They don't, for the most part, they don't run away.
Mm-hmm.
But we've had instances where they've just literally manifested, showed up, and vanished and stuff. And so, there's definitely a supernatural aspect to these beings in my mind. So, but I think that's pretty common as far as most cryptids anyway. I think Bigfoot for the most part is also a supernatural being, though I do believe there are areas where they are indigenous, like the Pacific Northwest and in Florida, down around the Gulf Coast and such. I think there are areas where they are indigenous. But I think in other areas, like in particular here in the East Coast and in the upper Midwest, where a lot of sightings are, I think they're normally single beings that people see. And they're very fleeting sightings. And they seem to, a lot of times, just disappear without a trace. And we've had instances where people have followed tracks, even out into the desert, where people have followed very distinct tracks that just suddenly disappear. And that's a conundrum that we just can't figure out. These things sprout wings and take off, or they just disappear somehow. Who knows?
I had a friend up in Placerville who was psychic, and she told me that, and Sylvia Brown always said this too, that we were like 3 to 6 feet away from the other side.
Mm-hmm.
We could reach over to the other side. But what my friend told me, which was interesting, was she saw a ghost walk across her front yard, and it looked like she was stepping up. The ghost was stepping up into a doorway,
Mm-hmm.
because it stepped up and disappeared. So maybe, like you say, with these with the dimensional stuff that's going on, maybe that's what's happening. Like when you say the footsteps suddenly stop, well, they step up into this other dimension.
Oh yeah, I think it's very possible. I mean, you hear all about these 411 missing reports or whatever, missing 411, people just suddenly disappear. Well, who's to say they're not walking inadvertently into a portal or some type of rift somehow and just vanish? You hear about that and you wonder what the hell it was, but actually, there's a lot of people that disappear a lot of places worldwide that just never come back. Now, could it be abduction? Could it be some type of cryptid, some natural being snatching them, or could it be them going through portals and not returning? It could be a number of things. I think as time goes on, though, we may very well end up getting a few more answers. I hope, anyway. But yeah, I think all of that's possible.
Because you hear reports too of children that disappear.
Mm-hmm.
And the parents are out looking for them frantically. Then they show up, but then the
Mm-hmm.
children will tell the parents, "Well, I don't understand because I was there the whole time. I saw you looking for me."
Mm-hmm.
It's just so
Yeah.
bizarre. Yeah.
It's almost like they go into another dimension or a linear, a parallel universe where they can kind of see you on the other side, but there's no way for them to get back. I've heard those stories as well, with alternate realities and parallel universes. I don't think it's necessarily the same as another dimension.
Right.
But I think all that, I think those theories are valid to a degree. And, I think the more we hear about them, I mean, sure. I mean, you're talking about people that watch the TV show like Fringe or something like that. Yeah, of course, that seems plausible by watching that. But I think to a lesser degree, there may very well be something like that that's possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you talk about the Mothman, I know everybody I know is like into the Mothman. They're just fascinated by the Mothman. The stories of it forecasting doom, like on the bridge, for instance. Have you had any things like that crop up in your investigations, other than the original Point Pleasant thing?
Yeah, I've looked into that theory. I've been looking into the Mothman phenomena for a long time. And I just don't feel that the Harbinger theory has much basis to it. You look at Point Pleasant, and here you have a bridge that collapses right before Christmas, and 46 people in a small town are killed. Well, I think they had already had these sightings of the supposed Mothman for about a year prior to that. So I think, because of being a small town and being such a huge tragedy in a small town, I think people are looking for excuses as to why it happened. There was structural problems with the bridge. I don't think the Mothman caused it, and I don't think there's anything like that predicted it. The only wing being Harbinger incident that I feel may have some clout to it is the what people called the Blackbird of Chernobyl. And a week or two before the Chernobyl disaster, people in the town near the plant had made comments about this huge black bird or black winged being flying above the reactor. And it was documented. That's the only one that I know of that was documented as before the actual disaster. So, people talked about Fukushima and people seeing winged beings, and then the bridge collapse over the Mississippi in Minneapolis and those type of things. But, it usually comes up after the fact. There's very little evidence to support that people had seen these things, beforehand. So, I don't really buy into the Harbinger thing.
That's what I first thought when I saw that report for the Tower Bridge here in Sacramento. My first thought was, uh-oh.
Yeah, well, that's interesting, because when I started getting these reports back in 2007 in Chicago, and it was starting to get out into the media, I was literally 24/7. I had people calling me in the middle of the night from Chicago, people hadn't had an incident, but were scared because they felt this meant some type of disaster was going to happen in Chicago, and they'd call me, and I had to try to belay their fears, and and tell them, well, I didn't believe anything was going to happen. But that was going. That July and August of 2017 was crazy, because we were getting 2 to 3 sightings a week, and all over the city, and people were scared. They thought something was going to happen in the city, and so.
Yeah, that's just how stuff spreads, though. Rumors, or even rumors, but they turn into folk. Folk tales where it's just snowballs and snowballs and snowballs from person to person to person. Let's talk about big flying birds, because I know that there have been a lot of sightings. People out in the woods and stuff that have seen these things. What do you think of those?
You mean the Thunderbird sightings, or
big Thunderbird sightings, stuff like that?
Traditionally, in indigenous peoples, there have been a lot of these Thunderbird stories. are these large bird sightings. I had a few of them. I've had a few people report them. And pretty good sized birds too. I mean, I've had people tell me that they've seen these birds land in front of them on a highway and just literally stretch across a 2-lane road. Big, big winged bird-like beings. We've had several here in Pennsylvania for the most part. Now, Stan Gordon has written about a lot of those. His new book, he talks about it as well. But he's been reporting those for over 40, 50 years now. But there seem to be some areas that do get a lot of those. California is another one. In the Central Valley, there's a lot of the large bird sightings. I've even had dragon sightings in your neck of the woods as well. But I'd say most of the sightings are in the Southwest, upper Midwest, particularly Indiana and Illinois. Here in Pennsylvania, some parts of the Mid-Atlantic, we do get some huge bird sightings.
What do you think it might be? I mean, obviously, when you look at people don't, the thing with people, what happens is people don't realize that birds do have a large wingspan. I mean, even my cockatiel, that has a pretty good sized wingspan when you think about it. And I think people don't realize that a hawk could have a 6 or 7 foot wingspan, right?
I think some of them could be misidentification, thinking it's something other than what it really is. You look at a condor or something like that. Right. I've seen some huge turkey vultures in the past. But is it a relic type of being? These thunderbirds, or even people describe pterosaurs like pterodactyls.
Right, I was thinking
we got a lot of those sightings.
Yeah,
especially in the Midwest. I don't know. Is it a relic? Is it something that's able to move within dimensions, which I believe is very possible?
Sure.
But and it's actually a worldwide phenomenon. Papua New Guinea, in particular, the Ropin sightings have been talked about for generations. People, even soldiers back in World War II saw these things. It seems to be a worldwide phenomenon. But of course, here in the United States, we seem to get a lot of sightings because it's like everybody's looking for stuff and is not afraid to, now especially people, because of the TV shows, the internet, and everything else, they're less inhibited about coming forward and talking about it. So I'd say in the last 20 years, we've really picked up on all this stuff.
And who's to say that? Because, I mean, when you look at even Northern California, you look at British Columbia, you look at a lot of parts, back east of where there's a lot of wood stuff, Wisconsin areas, lots of woods out there for something to hide in. So, I mean, like we talk about the pterosaurs or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of areas where they could have just stayed.
Here in Pennsylvania in particular, I read a statistic not long ago that 49% of the state is wooded and very, very little exploration in some of these areas. Pacific Northwest, absolutely. Northern California, all the way up into British Columbia, there are a lot of areas like that. But I think up there, there are a lot of different beings up there that may actually be indigenous just because of the terrain and, the weather and the way things are up there. As far as in this area and other areas in the upper Midwest and in the East that have a heavy concentration of wilderness, actually. I mean, there's a lot of unexplored wilderness, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, even Ohio. There's a lot of unexplored wilderness. And, these things raise their ugly heads sometimes. And, people happen to see it and we get the report. But, we get a lot of different stuff.
What do you think is the most reported creature that you hear about?
Oh, it's probably Bigfoot. I mean, that's been pretty consistent for decades, ever since the Patterson-Gimlin film and people being aware of it and not being as fearful and being ridiculed about it. Yeah, I think the Bigfoot phenomenon, because I don't think there's any state in the Union other than maybe Hawaii that hasn't had Bigfoot reports. And They may be something other than a Bigfoot. They may be some other hominid or something that's a misidentification, but we get a lot of sightings in a lot of different places.
And what I think is interesting, like you say, you know, different parts of the country, it's called different things. Like you got the boggy creature, you know, and you got stories like the one you called, you know, from your area, and it's different names. We're up here, you know, it's all Bigfoot or Sasquatch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's the same here. I mean, when people see these things around here, it's a Bigfoot, you know, for the most part. That's what they call it. But yeah, I mean, you know, I mean, we're lucky. I'm lucky to live in a state that just seems to have a lot of different things, and it keeps us busy.
How can you tell? I mean, if you're out looking at footprints, and I was just thinking about this because, I mean, there's a lot of rivers up here. There's a lot of wet, you know, ground up here. How can you tell? And I don't know if you've seen any footprints, you know, during your investigations, but how can you tell if it's if you think it's a legitimate footprint as opposed to say another animal and it's in the mud and it expands out?
It's difficult. I mean, you got to really know what you're looking for. If you get the right consistency in the soil to where you can see dermal ridges or you can see better definition, then you can probably tell if that's what it is. I would doubt that there's any giant out there walking around other than, you know, that's walking around barefoot in the middle of winter. I don't know, you know, but there have been some tracks out there that are very unusual and you know, that's what we feel could be an actual Bigfoot. But you know, those tracks you get in the snow, you know, that snow changes very quickly. A little bit of sun, an hour later, the thing is absolutely distorted, and you know, you can't take casts in the snow either. But yeah, I mean, I've seen some casts that have some good definition to them. They got the dermal ridges on them. They look like they have the break, the tarsal break in the middle of the foot, which is distinctive of what the Bigfoot, the way they walk, the way they move about. You know, it's not a common thing. People may think it's common. People see a lot of different things. You know, I have people send me photographs of every little divot that's in the ground thinking it's a Bigfoot. And, you know, it's just not that, you know. But yeah, I mean, occasionally we will come up with some decent ones.
Interesting. How many reports a month do you get of different cryptids?
Oh, Jesus. Well, just like today, I got 4 today.
Wow.
I'm not necessarily saying they're all factual,
right?
But I get a lot of different reports. I mean, I get phone calls and emails all the time, but I do solicit a lot of this stuff. So, but I am grateful to the people who come forward and involve me in their sightings and encounters. So yeah, but no, I get a lot. I really do.
Let's see, another question. Okay. All right, check making sure there's no other questions. My other question is, when you do get a report, what steps do you take once you get a report in? Do you phone them first, or do you go out on scene, or how's that work?
Well, if I get a report, let's say I get an email or I get a phone call, and I get something that I feel is worth looking into, I will normally continue to talk to the individual on a number of instances. If they've got any photographic evidence or physical evidence, I look at that. Then if I feel that it's worthy, I will contact, if it's somewhere else in the country, I'll contact one of my team members. We've got 17 team members who are actually boots on the ground team members. Then we've got 25 paranormal and cryptid groups as well who, you know, if I can't get any of my direct people to look into it, I'll get one of them to look into it. And of course, it's pretty well networked now as far as the cryptid community. So, you know, if you've got a group, you may get a call from me if I can't find anybody else, because that does happen. And yeah, so. And I have them look at it, and they will look into the situation and go to the witness, talk to them either by phone first and directly. And any of the reports that are generated as a result of that, we post it up on our team website, which is cryptidhunters.org. I usually post it on the blog as well.
Interesting. Very interesting. I'm fascinated by what you do because I mean, we obviously ghost hunt, but I've never gone out to look for cryptids. We were starting to get into that like 15 years ago, and then we kind of moved into another direction because I was even starting to get to the point where I was going to purchase trail cams and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I even read the BFRO handbook
mm-hmm.
that they give out.
Mm-hmm.
I read it from start to finish. And I was seriously considering doing this. Because we had a house up in Northern California is why we were maybe about 30 minutes away from Happy Camp.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't avoid that, right?
Mm-hmm.
That area.
Mm-hmm.
But I just find it interesting that you do this. And how much research do you do on this stuff? I mean, you must have just piles and piles.
That's all I do. It seems like by the time I get, because it's almost a daily thing. As far if I get something new, it comes in, I gotta research it before I post it, and then follow up on it. But I'm looking into stuff all the time. If I'm lucky enough to have some background in my files and such, and that's a plus. But many times I rely on the team members to do some work as well. So it just depends. I mean, it just depends how crazy and how interesting the sighting is. But yeah, we do. I do a lot of research.
Have you ever found the sighting so credible you couldn't denounce it?
Yeah, there have been a few, I guess, but of course, you're going to get you do get some real bizarre ones sometime, and if I can't find anything to back it up, I'm not saying that the person's lying to me.
Oh, right.
I give everybody the benefit of the doubt, but if I look into it and find it too incredible, I will rarely go further into it, though I may hand it off to somebody else to look into. That doesn't happen a whole lot, but it does happen.
Absolutely. I understand. Usually, like with us, we have to have at least two to three, pieces of evidence before we'll say it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
You just got to have that.
Yeah, it's almost it's a judgment call for the most part. I mean, if you've been doing this a long time, you can usually separate the wheat from the chaff when you get a report, and when you talk to the witness, you can kind of tell if they're trying to pull the wool over your eyes or trying to embellish or. But no, I feel bad about this because sometimes I'll get a report and it's just, I just get behind and it's just so much stuff piling up. And I try to give it the justice that it deserves for the most part. But man, I'm telling you, I get so much of it. I really do.
And in the case of the cryptids, it makes it difficult because by the time you guys get out on scene, it's been 2 or 3 days or whatever it has been, and whatever it is it's either going to be there or it's going to be gone.
No, yeah. I mean, that's unfortunately, unless it happens down the street, there isn't a whole lot you can do about it. Being here and I have several investigators here in this state, we can get there quicker, but there's a lot of factors involved. I mean, everybody's got a life. They just can't drop everything and go out and look into it.
Right.
But we try to do the best we can.
And then sometimes on the part of the witness too, there might be some hesitation because they don't want to have you think that they're nut jobs or anything like that.
Happens all the time. I will get somebody who's got a very credible sighting, is very distinct in what they're telling me, very believable. I will set something up and then it never formulates. We just don't get together. They've had second thoughts or or for whatever reason, but it happened. It does happen.
So what do you have to say to people that want to go out looking for these things?
Well, first of all, don't think you're going to go out in the woods and see one. or whatever you're looking for. That usually doesn't pan out. I think 99% of the sightings are happenstance. They just show up. That's what always fascinates me about these shows, hunting for this, hunting for that. They just never seem to hunt and find anything.
That's it.
They come up with a lot of anecdotal evidence and try to make it fit the profile or fit the agenda, but it doesn't seem to work that way. But that's with any paranormal. Even if you do a case, a haunting and such, it takes time. And you know that. You just can't go into a location and expect something to formulate or to manifest.
That's it.
It takes a lot of time.
Question in the chat room: does Lon have a favorite cryptid?
Oh yeah, the winged beings. Absolutely. Yeah, that's always been something that's interested me, even when I was younger.
Cool.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you so much for coming on tonight. I appreciate it. How can people contact you?
Well, they can go to phantomsandmonsters.com, and that's the blog site. We've got everything in the archive there, and we post daily. I also have a radio show. It's Phantoms and Monsters Radio. It's a live show Friday nights on YouTube at 9:00 Eastern. If you just put Phantoms and Monsters in radio into the search, it'll come up. And when you get there, subscribe, like it, and then you don't have to go searching for it again.
There you go.
Yeah, we have plus, got my team website, which is cryptidhunters.org. And we're always looking into stuff. And, if anybody has an account or a sighting and wants to contact me, my email is Lon Strickler at phantomsandmonsters.com.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's always fun to have you on and talk cryptids and monsters.
Thanks for having me.
It's always a blast. All right, Lon, thank you so much.
You take care.
Good evening. Mm-hmm. All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, that was fun. I love talking about Mothman and stuff with him. He is like the greatest cryptid hunter there is. Anyway, we're done with that show. Tomorrow night, we're going to be talking past lives. If our good friend Maren Muter is going to be back with us. We had a great conversation with her last time she was on, and I'm sure tomorrow isn't going to be much different. I'm excited about that. I don't know why I'm on double screen here. She's double screening me. Hang on. Okay, there we go. Anyway, I want to thank you guys for joining us. Again, we have 2 spots still open for the ghost hunt on Saturday, March 26th. So if you want to come in and meet me and work with some of my team members for some hands-on with our equipment, you can do that. And you can do that from CaliforniaHauntsRadio.com. Just go across the top and get to special events, and it'll pop right up for you. If you're on YouTube, again, please hit that subscribe button, because we're trying to get the word out, and the more subscribers, the merrier. And that subscribe button is the little ghost that's down in the right-hand corner that has the magnifying glass and the Sherlock Holmes cap on. That's our mascot. If you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you despise the show and despised me, share it with 5 of your enemies to get even. We're equal opportunity here at California Haunts Radio. Also, you see that ticker down at the bottom, and that is because we're a nonprofit, and everything you see here comes out of my pocket. So just like with the headphones and everything else that has to be replaced, I have to pay for it. So if you could find it in your heart to help me out a little bit, I'd appreciate it, because we want to keep this thing coming to you, because we have internet costs and all that other stuff just like anybody else. And you can do that at paypal.me/California Haunts, or if you're uncomfortable with PayPal, Venmo, and then California Haunts, and it'll pop right back up. Now, looking for YouTube sometimes is an issue with us. We do have a dedicated YouTube, blah, 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 / California Haunts, but it's a bunch of blah, blah in front of it, of course. So the best way to do that is to type in California Haunts on YouTube. It'll pop right up. Otherwise, you can go to the website at CaliforniaHauntsRadio.com, and the first video you see on the website, click on it. That'll take you to the YouTube site, and you can see all that stuff. Or if you want to check out the archives faster, go up to where it says archives at the top of the page, and then it'll take you the last 2 years of archives of our stuff on YouTube. I want to thank you guys for coming tonight. I really appreciate it again. And I will see you tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. I'm going to go ahead and run Lon's information. You can see some of his books here that he's written. And you can also see his websites, okay, plus his YouTube show and all that good stuff. And again, tomorrow we're going to be here with Maren Muter talking about past lives, okay? So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and run Lon's information. Websites phantomsandmonsters.com or cryptidhunters.org. We got Mothman Dynasty, Alien Disclosure, are two of his books. Winged Cryptids, and again, another version of Mothman Dynasty. Probably an older version. Cryptid Encounters and Bizarre Encounters. Unexplained Encounters and Strange Encounters. And Mysterious Encounters. And of course, those can be purchased at dun dun dun. Wait for it. Amazon.com. Boom. So again, I want to thank you guys for coming tonight. I will see you tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific for Mary Muter and talk about past life regression and what happens in your past lives and whatnot. Okay? I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good night.